I've created a lot of TV and movie home tours, but none quite like this one. Today, we're touring Hogwarts. Hi, I'm Marina Coates. Welcome to Behind the Scenes, where we get up close and personal with all your favorite TV and movie homes. While reading the Harry Potter books and watching the movies, I've often daydreamed about roaming and exploring the halls of Hogwarts. If you've ever wanted to do the same thing, today is your lucky day. We're going to start out at King's Cross Station in London, just like Harry did. King's Cross Station is actually a real railway station in London, dating all the way back to 1852. Since this is where Harry begins his adventure, it's also where we'll start ours, too. There it is, that famous but elusive platform 9 3/4. Let's have a go at it, shall we? The train ride itself is pure magic. All aboard! Let's find just the right cabin for your trip. Imagine yourself as a first-year student, settling in for the long trip to Hogwarts. Now grab a treat from the cart and sit back and enjoy the ride. This is where Ron asks to share a cabin with Harry, the trolley witch tempts them with her candy cart, and of course Harry buys the lot. And we get our first look at Hogwarts' most clever witch. Hermione drops by looking for Neville's toad. But it wasn't always light and happy here. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Dementors paid a visit to this very train. Looks like the train is taking off now. First stop, Hogsmeade Station. Fun fact, in the first 3 films, Hogsmeade was portrayed by the real-life station of Goathland in North Yorkshire. And speaking of Hogsmeade Station, we're pulling up right now. In an upcoming episode on this same channel, we'll also get to see Hogsmeade Village. But be patient, remember. You have to be a third-year student to visit there. Isn't Hogsmeade Station adorable? So quaint. I just couldn't leave it out of the tour. There were different ways for the students to get from the station to the school. Sometimes they went by boat, and other times by carriage. Today we're going to take the boat to the castle by crossing the Black Lake, just like Harry did on his first trip to Hogwarts. Different scenes show images of the boathouse in the distance, but I thought it would be fun to actually pull up to the boathouse on this tour. The boathouse we were shown couldn't possibly hold all of the boats going across the lake. So, was it magic? In the book, they actually describe a different way that the boats arrive at the castle, so I wanted to show it to you that way too. Besides, I like it that way better, more mysterious. It's described this way. They sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff on which it stood. "Heads down," yelled Hagrid as the first boats reached the cliff. They all bent their heads, and the little boat carried them through a curtain of ivy that hid a wide opening in the cliff face. They were carried along a dark tunnel which seemed to be taking them right underneath the castle, until they reached a kind of underground harbor, where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles. In the Goblet of Fire, the Durmstrang ship emerges out from under the water as the students arrive for the Triwizard Tournament. It's also the setting for the underwater contest held during that tournament. Before we enter the Great Hall, I want to point out a few items of interest to take note of as you take the tour. The grand doors that lead us into the Great Hall were trimmed out in stone in the first 3 films, and then later on, they are gold-plated. At the front of the hall, behind the tables, you'll notice a door on the left. However, we are not shown such a door on the exterior of the building. And yet, in the Goblet of Fire, Mad-Eye Moody makes his first appearance by entering through this very door. In the book, it's described as leading to the Chamber of Portraits, but in the movies, it doesn't take us there. On the right, you'll see the hourglasses that keep track of the points for each house, with jewels of different colors representing each one. Also at the front of the hall, where the headmaster and staff are seated, sits a throne-like chair for Dumbledore. In the first film, he addresses the students from this spot, but in later films, he speaks from a golden podium. We're also familiar with seeing the sorting hat on a stool at the front of the room. The podium and the sorting hat stool are not shown to us at the same time. However, since they're both such iconic pieces of the Great Hall, I chose to have them both at the front of the room for this tour. The gargoyle-like statues holding bowls of fire on either side of the room are meant to represent each of the 4 houses: a lion, a badger, a snake, and an eagle. And finally, the Great Hall went through several transformations during the series, including its placement. Starting with the 4th film, The Goblet of Fire, which I based my model on, the dining hall is just a few steps up from the courtyard. But in the first 3 films, the Great Hall was much higher up, and we're not shown the courtyard. In the book, the rooms directly below the Great Hall are where the house elves prepare all of the food for the students and faculty. And now let's tour the Great Hall. Afterwards, as a special treat, I will also walk us through the hall with it dressed up for both Halloween and then Christmas. In coming episodes, we'll be exploring other iconic places from the Harry Potter books, including many more of the rooms in Hogwarts. Comment below which rooms or places you would most like to see next. Now let's experiment with a little magic ourselves and see the Great Hall transformed for the holidays. And now, let's see it dressed up for Christmas. In the next episode of this series, we'll take the moving staircase and get comfy in the Gryffindor common room, and make a visit outside the castle to Hagrid's little hut. I will also be turning all of my tours into virtual reality tours over the next year, so you'll be able to take the tours on your own, wandering at your own pace and choosing which way to go. If you don't want to miss an episode, make sure to subscribe. But as for today, that's a wrap. See you next time on Behind the Scenes.